So we're still out here in Tolantongo. You can see if you're watching on YouTube, you can see in the background these huge hills that run down to this valley and this river that has hot water coming straight out of the mountain. We checked out the tunnels and the caves and the grottos, and everything is pretty fantastic. And I'm still here with my friend Gela, and I wanted to continue this conversation, talking about how you can live your life in a different way, like follow your, I don't know, live the dream, I guess. Live your life in a way that's maybe unprecedented, as an adventurer, a traveler, doing things like that. So I wanted to ask you what your life is like at the moment, like what you do in your daily life, or the work that you do and that kind of thing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
At the moment, I'm actually living in Costa Rica. I work as a homeschool teacher for 2 young boys, as well as the principal of a very small school with all the community children there. It's a mountain that we live on. It's actually the highest mountain, highest peak in all of Costa Rica, but we're at the base of it. Half the year I'll travel, and the other half I work with the children.
So I'm guessing you don't go through like a regular curriculum, like teaching the kids arithmetic, or like 1 + 1 = 2, and something like that. Tell me about how you work with the kids.
Well, for the most part, what I try and do is incorporate their interests, because it has to do with, my motto is that as adults, as teachers, as guidance, as parents, whatever, our main duty is to be that nutrition, that soil filled with nutrition, that rich soil that allows these tiny little seeds, which are the children, to take root and become any plant that they choose to be. So their interest is what guides me to see what we're going to be learning. For example, instead of just using the 2-dimensional world of just reading and writing, we obviously incorporate reading and writing in every class that we do have as well, for the most part. However, I try and put these things into practice so that it expands the thought process. If we're learning about vitamin C and how vitamins go through the body and they're distributed, we'll grab an orange. We have a creek by the house. You just drop the orange into the creek and follow it. So what I do is, like, as the children and I will walk together past the creek and watch how it actually flows. And the thought process of what we're learning is put into practice in a different manner than just, okay, memorizing this and this and that and confining them to a tiny little box of how we want to teach them. Because again, my motto is not that I'm the teacher in any way. I am a part of the process, a part of the learning process. So as they're learning, I'm learning. Not only am I learning about what we're learning about, I'm learning from them. I'm learning immensely, an immense amount of information and way of life from them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool. Yeah, well, that's the thing with traditional schools. It's like there's these very set roles. Someone is the teacher, someone is the student, and they never get reversed. You can never step into another role. That's what's happened for a long time, but that doesn't really happen with what you're doing. So, can you tell me about something that one of the kids has taught you?
Well, honestly, I do learn one thing from each of them, at least one thing, but they have different, I could actually tell you the story. I think I told you the story about the youngest, the 6-year-old. It's the thought process. It's the way they are. Like, he's very physical. He's very active. He's very comfortable with his body and quite fearless in every aspect of his life. So we have these like sand hills, and he jumps and does front flips and back flips off of them and right into the sand. And to give me encouragement, to kind of give me that boost of encouragement, he's just like, Lalita, he calls me Lalita. Lalita, just concentrate on what you're going to do. Envision yourself doing your front flip, and just push everything else out of your mind. There's no fear. And this is a 6-year-old, you know? This is like an amazing teacher. He's one of my biggest teachers. But it's just to be able to see them outside of that normal environment of having to sit down and learn. Because I lived in Sweden, and I had children that were 5 years old, 6 years old, going over to school. And then when they come back and visit or pick up their younger siblings, you could see the light in their eyes has gone out. And I remember asking one of them, like, so how's school? I never like hype it up like, how's school? It's great. Yeah. It's just, you have to ask them to let them tell you how they feel, as opposed to having to answer in a way that you've already expressed the answer that you want. So it's like, you're already making it exciting. School's got to be exciting. And this is in Sweden. And she looked at me and she said something that really broke my heart. She said, I don't get to do the things we did here, because this was a preschool that I worked at in Sweden. And I asked her, I said, what do you mean? She said, well, I just sit down and I just read and I write and I don't get to move. I don't get to do anything. And the stagnation these children feel within their bodies has everything to do with how we are communicating with them and allowing them to learn from life, as opposed to here's a government assigned or educated person who is going to be telling you exactly what you need to know about life. It's not our job.
Yeah, yeah, cool. So let's talk more about how people just seem to give you houses. So, because you told me a few stories, especially one about La Playa Blanca in Colombia, where you can tell me more. Tell me how you got to be in Colombia and in Cartagena in La Playa Blanca. Tell me more.
Well, it's not something I've ever been seeking. I've never looked to own any property or a house in any way. However, it's been a common theme in my life where anywhere I go, I've just been provided with a house. With Colombia, it was complete and utter synchronicity. I was traveling actually from Peru through Colombia to go up to Costa Rica. And as I'm on my way to Costa Rica, I decided to stop in Cartagena. From there, I was told about a place called Playa Blanca and White Lotus Union. I didn't know what it was. I had no idea, but the name, everything about it just pulled me in. And I felt, okay, this is why I was heading in this direction before Costa Rica. So I took my tiny little self all the way to Playa Blanca. And when I got there, I asked for a place called White Lotus Union. When I got to White Lotus Union, I ended up meeting two gems who I cherish dearly, Walter and Maggie. And these two wonderful people they had built a house along with a few other people, but they were the only ones that were left. They built this beautiful bamboo house, no walls, no doors, but incredibly open space. And they had been apparently looking for a vegan chef. So when I showed up, all I did was tell them that I was looking for a room to rent or maybe offer like work exchange. I didn't know. I kind of was open to anything. And they told me that they had sat down and had a meditation session that day asking for a vegan chef to come onto their property. And 2 days into the connection with them, they told me they were actually planning on moving to Sweden. So part of their journey was to move to Sweden, which is where I used to live, and that they wanted to offer the house for me to stay there for as long as I wanted to. So I stayed there for about 2 months before I headed on over to Panama, Costa Rica. So it's just been this reoccurring theme. Same thing has happened in Peru, in Tarapoto, where just somebody needed me to they just offered me a house to live in. They were gone. So for 3-4 months, I had a house in Tarapoto. And then now when I moved out here to Costa Rica, the first thing the family that hired me told me was, we've rented you a house. And I hadn't seen it, but the giggles came right up because I knew what it was leading up to. It was the same theme.
Great. In that case, you said you didn't really plan to have a house, but you did have some kind of vague intention, or like the other day you told me about the letters that you wrote from immigration and from the insurance company, and they ended up coming back to you as in reality as the actual letters.
Word for word.
Yeah, right. Word for word. And in this case, how did you manifest it, or was there a conscious process that went into it?
Well, I can't necessarily say it was a very conscious process behind this manifestation. However, I think it had more to do with synchronicities. I was really looking for, with Playa Blanca, I was looking for a tranquil place to stay. With Tarapoto, I was looking for a place in San Roque, and it's very hard to find a place like that. And we were given a house. It was my ex and I, we were given a house that had, there were 3 hexagons put together. Just enormous house. And the same thing with here. Here it was actually intentional. In Costa Rica, it was very intentional. My intention was to go back to working with children, have enough space. It's not a matter of space, physical space, but it had more to do with sorry, I'm getting distracted. It had a little bit more to do with having space to be able to go within as well as have space to not be distracted. Speaking of distractions, and work with children, however, still work with retreat centers, workshops, still cooking, still being a vegan chef. And the opportunity that was, and most people did laugh at me when I told them that. I'm like, I want to work with all these things. And they said, you can't find a place that would offer you all three at the same time, chefing, retreat, and working with children. And from out of the blue, I got a phone call from a sister who told me, said, the family that I know is looking for a teacher, but the community is as well. And it turns out that the family actually owns a retreat center. So the property is actually a giant retreat center. I live on the other side of the river, in my own space. And I'm actually also chefing for them when I want to. So I do get to do all three. I do get to stay involved the exact same way I wanted it to. So I think it has everything to do with, and everyone told me, the more they told me it's not going to happen, it's impossible to get all three, the more I knew it was going to happen. Because the more odds that are against you, the more you know that this is actually your power is fighting you. So you can actually just shift it into the other direction.
Okay, that's interesting. So, so when people tell you that you can't do something, you take it as an indication that it is possible. Is that right?
I think it has more to do with your own fears manifesting through other people. So if somebody's telling you that you can't do it, these are the doubts within yourself that are telling you that, are you sure you deserve this? Can you really do it? Because we talked about this, I think, a few days ago, is that I think when it comes to manifestations, the biggest and the most important step that people need to take is to know their self-worth. And it has nothing to do with who you are, your characteristics, or what you've done in your life, if you've been a quote-unquote good or bad person. Perspective has everything to do with this duality of the good and bad. At the end of the day, we're living. We're supposed to be alive. And everything that makes you feel alive, that electricity is pumping through you, that is what's supposed to be bringing you your manifestations, because that's the fuel you put behind your vision. When you envision something, when you actually have these visualized what should I say, stepping stones in your life, I guess, because I don't want to stagnate them, because they're just all stepping stones, one leading to the next.
All right. Well, I know a lot of people are going to hear that and they're going to be like, what the hell? That was a bunch of woo-woo nonsense. But but we're talking about like visualizing something and feeling the emotion that's associated with it. So it puts you in that place. So it's if you want to be more scientific, you'd call it like self-hypnosis. You're planting the seed to be confident. I mean, I know obviously you got that doubting look on your face, because I know self-hypnosis doesn't completely describe what you're talking about, but it's a way to get an angle on it.
Exactly, I agree. For people to be able to see it, to be able to understand the power of manifestation, I agree with you. It is. Yeah,
cool. Yeah, so you mean, let's see. Well, I completely forgot where I was going to go.
Children.
Okay. Actually, one thing I was going to bring up was, I think a lot of people would see you and they say, well, she's this young woman, very pretty and petite, and it's probably easy for her to just coast through the world, and people give her things. But we have this, like with Kenny, conscious Kenny Palorentano. He's not small. He's about as tall as me. Got a big beard, very hairy, but a huge smile. And he goes through the world just saying to people, "Hey, I want to offer value." Well, he doesn't say that directly, but he looks for ways to offer value. Says to people, "Hey, well, I will cook for you," and they give him food and board and all this kind of thing. So it's not restricted to a particular person.
No.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. And that's the thing. This is also, it's reflected if we can relate back to how when you know somebody, their physical appearance changes for you, because you start really coming more in tune with their energy. So it's their energy that's pushing out. You don't see them as much as you feel them. So like you said, his giant smile, I know Kenny's giant smile, it just electrifies your body when you see it. So it's just, I think it has everything to do with that. And then again, it's always a matter of perspective. If we're going to look at me being petite, cute, pretty female, there's also the thought process that my mom, for example, has. Oh my goodness, you're out in this vast world. You're petite, you're cute, you're tiny, you're female. All these dangers and odds are against you. It's all a matter of perspective. Yeah. So I think, at the end of the day, like you said, it's the energy.
Yeah, so true. Yeah, that's cool. So another thing I wanted to talk to you about was about depression, or about mental health, and a lot of people will feel stagnant in their jobs or in their life, and they won't know the steps that they can take, or they probably won't even think about it in terms of mentality, like how their attitude is affecting their quality of life. So what would you say to someone in that case? Like that, obviously you would talk about their mentality, perhaps also their lifestyle habits, their diet. What other things what tips would you offer someone in that situation?
I'm about to rant. Are you ready?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, so let's start with your first question, depression and the thought process. Like, that's the foundation of the question. I always say emotions, again, feelings are emotions, emotions are emotions, energies in motion. And a lot of people really understand this. At the end of the day, the dualistic lifestyle that we live, we forget that it's, whether you're happy, you try and boost that feeling up. And when you're sad, you try and push it down. And this is where we stagnate in our emotions and we get pulled back and forth, where we're drawn depending on how we feel in the moment. Living in the moment is not necessarily the same thing as feeling that moment and just being pulled around. So with depression, it's just information that's coming to you. Again, if I were to, let me give you an example. Let me just keep going. So at the end of the day, it's just information. However you decide to perceive it, it's similar to what you said, like small, petite, this and that. We can look at it from two different angles. It's still the same coin. It's just two sides of the same coin. So with depression, people try and kind of dampen it down. And then when they're happy, they try and milk it for all they got. You know, like, I want to feel this great. But realizing that it's just information at the end of the day allows us to not be pulled down. Like you said, like depression, right? Like, those words actually mean a lot. It's not how they're spelled. It's not the definitions that we assign them. It has everything to do with the frequency of the word, because it actually vibrates in a different way. So when you say like feeling down, it has everything to do with density, the weight, right? So when you're feeling down, it has everything to do with your energy being dense. So if we realize that we have the chakra system, for example, it's not about getting as high as you can, because that's me, always buzzing, but that doesn't find balance. That doesn't define balance, and it doesn't create balance within myself or my life. So I think the way I see it is that we are tiny little fractals of the earth itself. Excuse me. So as tiny little fractals of the earth, we have the exact same cells. We're the little cells of the earth. Within us, we have the cells as well. So going back to like listening to how words sound, self, yourself. If you take the S-E-L and change it to C-E-L-L, you realize that every single time you speak to yourself, you're speaking to every single tiny little cell. And I think I mentioned vaguely about the first 8 cells that are created. That is the definition of what you embody. So as a human being,
Can you explain that a little bit?
Absolutely. As a human being, the very first 8 cells that are created, when they're split, those are the same 8 cells that every other cell regenerates itself after. So depending on how those 8 cells, they never regenerate, they remain the same. However, you alter them. So they are the definition of your well-being when it comes to mind, body, soul health. And every other cell will replicate itself depending on how they are. So when you're eating, eat for those cells. When you're walking, walk with those cells. Like, having that connection to 8 tiny cells within your body is going to be able to expand them so quickly without us having to put any effort into not feeling depressed. So we raise our vibration, not just to be able to raise the energy up through our physical bodies. Sorry, forgive me. But it has everything to do with how our physical bodies are feeling as well. So when you eat light, it has nothing to do with eating light. It has more to do with eating lighter foods, as in not dense. The reason people do eat dense foods, it has everything to do with the parasites. So a lot of these depressions that people have, depression, remember, you're feeling down, it's not necessarily you that's feeling down. It's a dense feeling of, the food we eat, the thoughts we have, not necessarily always our own thoughts. Like we did last time. If I touch your hand and I remove my hand, can you still feel my hand there? Yeah. You still feel the energy. That doesn't change, because we physically think that we need tangible things to know that, okay, this has altered this. But the energy within us is transferred whether we see it or are conscious of it or not. So a lot of the thoughts people have when it's surrounding like circumstances, their situation, they don't have enough money, they don't have this. They're always looking at the lack because there are organisms from within that are seeking things that are going to help them survive, as opposed to the human that they're inside of, the vehicle that they're inside of. So I do think that food has a lot to do with it. Look, everything around us we consume. Absolutely everything, from air to thoughts to food to absolutely everything. It's a matter of conscious consumption. It's a matter of realizing that what you're eating is going to feed, again, those very 8 cells, and then what you are is going to be embodied by those very 8 cells.
Well, I think about when you mentioned those 8 cells, I notice how you're very empathetic, even with the smallest thing, like a bee. Something you're very patient, and you notice it and respect it, and I guess that's probably related because you're thinking about these cells within yourself. I mean, a lot of people wouldn't even think to have empathy for something so small within them, but the small things make up what we are.
Absolutely, you actually hit the nail on the head, because there was the next thing I was going to mention, but I completely forgot. But thank you for reminding me. The small things, those very 8 cells also represent that tiny little child within, right? The reason we also feel depressed is because we don't allow the inner child to be revived. I think the most important thing when it comes to people feeling a disconnection with themselves or other people around them or life in general has everything to do with the disconnection of the inner child. So the way I look at it is it's a matter of zooming in and out. So when it comes to depression, for example, and an exercise that I'd like to offer as advice is to be able to zoom in and out to get that perspective. Zoom in and out to be able to see those tiny little details of life that make everything so rich and, I mean, absolutely incredibly magical. However, to be able to zoom out and not let the little things weigh you down. To realize that it's a part of a larger scheme of things. So for those people that are feeling like stagnant and stuck, the question is, if we're going to look at the duality in life, if you were to, just as an example, if you were to get fired tomorrow, and not you, you're your own boss, I'm not sure how you can fire yourself, but if somebody were working at a job that they were about to get fired from, my first and only response to somebody telling me they got fired is congratulations, as it should be, you were set free. But let's look at something that they deem as negative. If you deem something as negative, or it's something that you need, like money, and you get fired from your job, but then 2 months later it leads you to being set free, to moving to another country that you experience what life is truly about, or you find a job wherever you are that you feel fulfilled with, and like not a job necessarily, a purpose is what I'd like to call it. Would the first thing be considered bad still if it led to something quote unquote good?
Right.
It doesn't necessarily work in the same manner that we usually think it does. So I don't remember where my thought process was going with it. But yeah.
Okay, good. Well, let's move on. So the other thing is, when a lot of people are trapped in this lifestyle, or trapped in the matrix and 9 to 5 or whatever, they don't really know. To them, it seems completely alien to live a life traveling the world, or meeting people and just having a backpack and sleeping on the beach, or whatever happens. So how can they start to build a bridge into a different lifestyle?
Okay, well, I think for those that know me, silence is not something that really I can say I'm very good at. However, I'm learning to be silent and be still. That's what I've learned. When you are silent and still, you realize that every single step you take is an experience, and what you can grab so much knowledge and experience from every step that you take. You mentioned it, like sleeping on the beach. Yeah, I do. I've been offered so many houses. It's unbelievable. I have never had to buy one or pay for it, because it's not the money, it's the experience that I've been pulling myself towards. But I've also I've had apartments, incredible apartments in Chaco that were like literally built on the spot for me, right beside the restaurant. But I would choose to sleep on the beach, because it's the experience. It's not the comfort, it's not the money, it's not the accomplishments and the goals, it's the experience. It's never the finish line, right? So within that, the advice that I would usually give people is just fly. You don't see a bird looking down. You do not see a bird looking for a safety net. You don't see how somebody else is going to help it get from point A to B. It soars. And that's what we've forgotten to do because of this density that we talked about earlier. It has everything to do with being able to just soar and go through the experience. You might have to sleep on the beach one night. You might have to sleep on the street one night. But that's a manifestation you've actually chosen because your fear has told you this is the worst thing that can happen to you. What you ended up doing is going, okay, let me see if I can actually experience this. And is it really the worst thing that can happen to me? Because once you do it, you're like, oh, it wasn't even that bad. What was I afraid of? Well, the fear is there to give you information of how powerful you are. So right then and there, it washes off. And then you take the next step and you realize I can accomplish anything. It's not a matter of I want to have a rich house. If that's what you want, that's fine. If you want all the money in the world, that's fine. That's probably you telling yourself that you want to be able to up your manifestation skills, right? So then you create exactly what you want. And again, it's the same thing, same coin, different sides with the fear. When it comes to people, because there are different people that do want to move. I have a lot of friends that ask me that have children as well that ask me, how would I move out there with my kids? I need to make sure my kids are fine. Your children are your biggest allies. They're the ones manifesting this stuff for you. They're the ones keeping your inner child alive as well because they're a reflection of your inner child. So what's happening is that instead of being fearful of protecting our children or I have to be able to feed them, what if they're hungry one night? It doesn't work like that. It really doesn't. You are restricting and actually not restricting, but you're putting force into a place that doesn't need to be. So there's going to be some kind of battle between their manifestation of wanting to live life like that with you and your desire to do it, but your fears coming in. So there's what's the word I'm looking for? Not restriction, but it starts with R. It starts with R. Anyways, but there is some kind of there is some kind of battle within people, especially mothers. I always say I just think it's magical how there are so many tigress, lioness mamas and papas out there that just do so much for their children, but they forget because they're in the process of sacrificing, and this cycle will loop itself, will continue. So their children will learn to sacrifice themselves. We're not here to sacrifice, we're here to experience. We're here to really, truly live. So once you sacrifice yourself for your children, they're not going to be able to experience life the way you would want them to do with absolute and utter freedom. So if you have children, go for it. Just go. You don't need that much money. You really don't. Money, okay, just one last thing. Money is currency, right? What is a current? An electric flow. So, and what are we? Electric beings? So all it is one person, it's the tool to get from A to B. But people focus so much on the tool, they forget to actually get to B. It's like wanting to build a house. If money would be your currency from A to B, look at it as the house being your goal. However, the tool, money in this case, being the hammer. If you're just going to focus on the hammer, you're going to forget the wood, you're going to forget the foundation, you're going to forget the experience of building that house because you're so focused on the one thing you think you don't have. However, that current, that flow will come to you because you're the source of the electricity, which is why within these systems, people have to go and work as hard as they do just to be able to give of themselves that inner chi that's already there, that's manifesting everything, but do it in such a mundane and physical aspect and take the magic out of life. So you have to actually work to get this much money so you can go do that thing, when in reality, you don't need any of that. You can just flick them off and go, that's my reality, that's the experience I'd like to have. And I guarantee you, it's ridiculously easy. It is ridiculously easy, but people don't allow themselves to know that they deserve it. They forget that they deserve every single thing that they desire. May it be 100 women or 100 flowers, or if it be 100 houses. It doesn't matter what you're seeking. What you're seeking can come to you just as easily as long as you stop obstructing your own path. So just see it and the experience will land right in front of your feet.
Yeah, that's so cool. It makes me think of when Bill Hicks talks about like boy bands, and he's like, everybody says, oh, they're such good role models for the kids. And it's like, well, what the fuck kind of role model is mediocrity? That's not a role model that you want for your kids. You want your kids to rock. Yeah. Another thing I wanted to ask you, what advice would you give if you met yourself as a 10-year-old? What advice would you give yourself?
Oh, that's a really good question. I love that. That's going to have me thinking about it even after I answer it too. I'm trying not to regress back to who I was when I was 10, but just to kind of give the advice that it would be honestly what I tell the children. I just realized that. Thank you for that epiphany. It would be the same thing that I would tell the children. Just magic. Magic. Absolute magic. Can I tell you a little story?
Yes.
So at the preschool that I used to work at in Sweden, we were walking one day through the park and we see this, I'm going to make it as quick as possible, see a tiny little black poodle, and this little black poodle, one of the children didn't get to, you actually know which child, but one of the children didn't get to pet this little black poodle. And she started crying after everybody left, and she's just like, I wanted to pet him too, and nobody let me. So I told her, I said, well, we'll see another black poodle. She goes, I wanted to see that one. I'm like, well, we can see that one again. All we got to do is just see it. Remember that feeling that you feel like you didn't get to have. Imagine it just happened, and feel it, and I promise you we'll be able to see the black poodle. So as we were walking, one of the older kids looked at me and said, I know you're just saying that because she's a child, but she's like 5, 6 years old. She goes, but that's not real, because I told her magic exists. And she goes, that's not real. And I told her, I said, I guarantee you it is. So how's this, Emmy? Work with me. Let's see the black poodle, because we're all going to do this together. Let's just see that black poodle come in while we're walking back to the school from the park. And as we were walking, less than 2 blocks, and that poodle was going in that direction, and we're going here. I kid you not. I don't know how it happened. Well, I know exactly how it happened, but right then and there comes the black poodle. And they all looked at me like just astonished. I'm like, I didn't do it. You did it. Like, this is a collective creation. There's a co-creation. People call it coincidences. It's co-created incidences. At the end of the day, we work together to heighten that manifestation power. And later on, that, I think it was the day after, Emmy's mom comes up to me. Her name isn't Emmy. I'm just calling her that for the sake of her privacy and integrity. So she turns around and she called me up. And she came up to me. She goes, I love what you do with the children. They're supposed to be allowed to feel like magic really does exist. And I said, well, it does. We should all know it. And she goes, and she kind of gave me a smile like, oh, honey. And I looked at her. I said, listen. And I still have amazing contact with this woman. And I told her, I said, you know what? This weekend, when you're with your child, see your black poodle. Do anything. Try these little tiny things. Walk along that path and see the black poodle. And of course, Monday comes. She walks up to me. She goes, I don't know how this is possible. We've been seeing so many black poodles all weekend long. I've never seen as many black poodles in my entire life. So I told her, I said, this is for your inner child to be able to take and cherish and keep, and be able to remember that no matter what it is, grab hold of life and bring forth that black poodle for yourself. So if I were to go back and meet my inner child, I'd just say, keep going. You're right on the right path. Just keep on allowing the magic to live within you, not to believe in it, but for it to live within you. Because when some of these things happen to us, when we clearly and consciously actually go for a manifestation and it lands at your feet, there's no denying it. You can't deny it. There's no way anybody can tell you anything that will take that experience away from you. And not just experience, the empowerment. In a world where we've been told we have no power, we're just a bunch of working ants, But that empowerment, that realization, when it comes to you, there's nothing like it. You can have all the black poodles in the world.
That's wonderful. I don't know if I'd go for a black poodle.
No.
Maybe a kitten. Yeah. Thanks, Gela. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks.